denuclearization of the Korean peninsula and lead to the establishment of lasting peace in the region. Here's the Blue House spokesman.
We hope the exchanges between the two Koreas, between Pyongyang and Beijing, and between Pyongyang and Washington will create a virtuous circle so that progress in each of these exchanges will lead to progress in the others. In particular, we hope that Chairman Kim Jong-un's fourth visit to China will serve as a stepping stone to a second North Korea-U.S. summit.
The Blue House spokesman said that Seoul has been in close contact with both North Korea and China regarding Kim's visit to Beijing, although he did not specify exactly when the South Korean government was notified of it. When asked whether the two Koreas are currently pursuing any exchanges of special envoys or high-level talks, the Blue House official said there are no current plans. The amount of humanitarian food aid sent to North Korea has fallen drastically due to the economic sanctions imposed on the regime. According to a report from the World Food Program, last November, the amount sent was just a third of the amount the previous month. In November, the North got 363 tons of food, which was provided to around 457,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women and children under 5 years old. A month earlier, it was 1,083 tons. The report blames the sanctions on North Korea, which have been causing problems for international shipping. A shakeup at the South Korean presidential office today, affecting a few but certainly high-profile posts. President Moon is replacing two of his secretaries and his chief of staff. Korea's ambassador to China, Yong Kim, has been named to replace presidential chief of staff Im Jong-suk. The president's top secretary for political affairs will be former three-term lawmaker Kang Ki-jung and his senior secretary for public relations Yoon Do-han, a former journalist. South Korea has released a video in 6 more languages to refute Japan's claims that one of South Korea's planes was locked on by a South Korean warship's targeting radar. The clip, already released by the Defense Ministry in Korean and English, makes clear Seoul's position that its Navy did not intend to threaten the Japanese patrol aircraft and did not use radar on it. The video also urges Japan to stop politicizing the issue. It asks the Japanese government to answer why, in international waters, the aircraft was flying at low altitude in a menacing way that would disrupt the warship's humanitarian mission. According to a military source, South Korea and Japan are currently setting up working-level talks on the issue. Data out from last November showed Korea was still in the black in terms of trade. The current account posted a surplus for the 81st month in a row. That's well over 6.5 years running. But the surplus was the smallest in 7 months because of weaker exports. Go Jun-hee reports.
South Korea's current account, which records a nation's transactions with the rest of the world, including its trade in goods and services, has now recorded a surplus each and every month for almost 7 years. However, data from last November showed the size of the surplus slid to its lowest level since April 2018. According to the Bank of Korea, the current account posted a surplus of almost $5.1 billion in November, down from $7.4 billion a year earlier. The central bank attributed the lower numbers to a smaller surplus in the goods account, mainly due to slower export growth. The goods account had a surplus of around $8 billion, down from $11.5 in November 2017. Exports edged up a mere 0.5% on year in November, mainly due to falling semiconductor prices. Analysts say there's lower demand because many data centers around the world have been postponing their purchases of semiconductors. These centers refer to centralized locations where computing and networking equipment is concentrated for storing or processing large amounts of data. Another reason is slowing global growth. According to a World Trade Organization forecast in September, global trade growth will grind to 3.9% in 2018, a slowdown from the 4.7% recorded in 2017. Analysts say the ongoing trade war between the U.S. and China is hurting the global economy, including South Korea's export-driven economy. The services account deficit fell to around $2.3 billion from a deficit of $3.3 billion a year earlier. This was due to an improvement in the travel account as South Korea saw an uptick in number of visitors from China and Japan. Arirang News.
Profits at the world's biggest smartphone maker, Samsung Electronics, fell sharply in the fourth quarter and were way below market expectations. Profits for the whole of 2018, though, were at an all-time high. Kim Jong-un has the details.
2018 for Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics could be summed up as bittersweet as it releases its provisional earnings report on Tuesday. Fourth quarter earnings have dropped sharply mainly due to sluggish demand in the memory chip business and growing competition in the smartphone sector. Operating profits in the fourth quarter tumbled 28.7% on year to around $9.7 billion, while Q4 sales dropped by nearly 10.6% to record $52.8 billion. That's much lower than predictions made by local analysts, which estimated Samsung Electronics would see $10.7 billion in Q4 operating profits and Q4 sales of $55.4 billion. Meanwhile, the company's sales and operating profits both hit a yearly all-time high in 2018 due to a semiconductor boom that lasted until the third quarter. The company's combined sales for 2018 surpassed $217.7 billion, and operating profits amounted to more than $53.6 billion. The worst may not be over for Samsung as analysts anticipate semiconductor prices to drop further this year. The Korean smartphone maker has attempted to recover from the dismal fourth quarter figures by joining hands with U.S. tech giant Apple, a rare move considering they've been locked into years-long patent suits around the world. They've announced Sunday that Samsung Smart TVs will offer iTunes movie and TV show service from this spring. Both companies face challenges from Chinese competitors as they expand their presence in China and other emerging markets. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
The head of the World Bank is on his way out. Yong Kim announced his sudden resignation on Monday despite having 3 years left in his term. The Korean-American did not give a reason for his decision, but said he'll be stepping down on February 1st. The World Bank says Kim will join a firm with a focus on increasing infrastructure investments in developing countries. The former medical doctor will also rejoin the Board of Partners in Health, an organization he co-founded. Another World Bank official will take the reins as interim chief before U.S. President Donald Trump selects Kim's successor. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in China for the fourth time for another summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. North Korean and Chinese state medias have both confirmed the news and reported that it was Xi who invited Kim to Beijing. Oh Jung-hee reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in China for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. A special train carrying Kim Jong-un and his wife Lee Seol-ju, plus a few other key officials from the regime, arrived in Beijing on Tuesday morning. According to North Korean and Chinese media, Chinese President Xi Jinping invited Kim Jong-un for the 4-day visit. Kim was accompanied by several top aides, including Kim Yong-chul, the official in charge of negotiations with the U.S. State Department, and a couple of key foreign affairs officials like Ri Su-yong and Ri Yong-ho, as well as those in charge of the economy and the military. This is Kim Jong-un's fourth visit to China. He met with Xi Jinping 3 times last year, once before his first summit with South Korean President Moon Jae-in, once before his June summit with U.S. President Donald Trump, and once right after the Singapore summit. All in all, Kim met Xi roughly a month before those big events, so Kim's Beijing visit this time raises the question of whether a second Pyongyang-Washington summit or Kim's cross-border visit to South Korea will happen anytime soon. As Washington has been creating the atmosphere for another summit with North Korea, it's highly likely that Kim and Xi will share opinions on the denuclearization talks. Involving China in the signing of the peace treaty could be another talking point, as Kim Jong-un, through his New Year's address, called for multilateral negotiations to end the decades-long war. Watchers also believe Kim could tour around some industrial facilities in China in view of his focus on economic development. Differently from the past, Pyongyang state media revealed the news that Kim is away to China while he was still on his way to Beijing. In the case of the past 3 visits, the agency reported the news on the last day of the visit or after the visit. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Joining us now to discuss this latest development further is Dr. James Kim, a research fellow from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So as laid out in that report, this is Kim's 4th visit to China. He visited in March for the first time, but he also visited in May and June, right before and after his landmark summit with President Trump. Now, the timing of this latest visit comes as anticipation and speculation about the second North Korea-U.S. summit builds as well. So can we safely assume that this is why Kim has gone to Beijing to discuss this possible summit?
Yes, I think given the history that you just talked about, along with President Trump's latest statement regarding this matter, I believe that working level talks are back on to arrange for a second summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The move also sends a sort of a message, or it certainly looks like there's an appearance of close coordination between Pyongyang and Beijing about these issues as well. So on many fronts, I think Kim Jong-un's visit serves many purposes for North Korea.
As you mentioned in that report as well, the Chinese and North Korean media sources are saying that it was in fact Xi Jinping who invited Kim Jong-un this time to come to Beijing. Does that tell us anything about this particular meeting as well?
Well, China has, for a very long time, wanted to reinsert itself into this process. But given that President Trump has wanted to approach this issue from a bilateral angle, China has not been involved in any 6-party talks framework. So to some extent, I think President Xi Jinping wants to know how the negotiations are going, and he also wants to have some input into some of the concerns that China may have that Kim Jong-un could take into consideration as he goes into a second summit with Donald Trump. The second issue here is that, and this is debatable and arguable, but China could have potentially more to gain from these talks than North Korea, given the implications, the geopolitical implication of U.S. presence on the Korean Peninsula and in the region. So China may want to sort of go beyond the nuclear issue to talk a bit more about U.S. Projection of its power in the region. And President Xi Jinping would probably want Kim Jong-un to consider that issue a factor as well as he goes into talks with Donald Trump.
Donald Trump had said recently that the U.S. is currently in negotiations with North Korea over the possible summit locations. But I think perhaps some of us, took it with a pinch of salt that we weren't sure whether this North Korea-U.S. summit was really going to happen soon, as Trump had suggested. But do you think this meeting now in Beijing suggests that it really is going to happen quite soon?
Well, for much of December, almost all of December, I think we were in a holding pattern ever since North Korea canceled the working level talks towards the end of November. But the turning point came with Kim Jong-un's New Year's address, where he again reiterated his willingness to enter into a dialogue with the United States at any time to discuss the possibility of denuclearization. And so that was a reassuring point, and followed by this meeting only 7 days after that announcement, along with President Trump's statement that working level talks have started about the second summit, all suggests to me that there's a likelihood of a second U.S. DPRK summit somewhere within the next 2 to 3 months.
The question now, I think, is Kim Jong-un is in Beijing, but what is he trying to get out of this visit as well? And you also mentioned that this could be good for Beijing. What is Xi Jinping really looking to get out of this? What groundwork are they laying out for this U.S. summit?
Well, 2 things from Kim Jong-un's standpoint. One is obviously de facto sanctions relief, without China actually coming out formally to say that they are, not participating in the international sanctions. So trying to get more concessions from China on the sanctions part. Second possibility is any kind of economic assistance that China can provide in order to further Kim Jong-un's goals of realizing the dream of economic development in North Korea. It's part of his legacy, and it's what he's laid out for his leadership. So on both fronts, I think a lot of the carrots that he could gain out of these meetings would be some form of an economic incentive. For China, it's beyond economy, and it's, as I've mentioned before, it's about the geopolitical implications of the U.S. strategic presence in the region. So, you know, the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea, the USFK troop placement in South Korea, along with in Japan. So all of that, I think, is are stuff that China would like North Korea to bring out in these meetings and trying to get some concessions from the United States about.
Trump has previously accused Xi Jinping of meddling in North Korean affairs like this, specifically influencing the North Korean leader to play hardball in negotiations. I mean, how do you think Trump will react to this particular trip now, coming at this timing? And do you think his concerns actually have a point, though? Are they based in some sort of reality, do you think?
There's some data that's coming out, and which is relatively mixed, about how closely China is participating in the international sanctions. But formally speaking, I think Secretary Pompeo just had an interview on CNBC where he argued very strongly that China is a willing participant, that they are not going to treat this issue as an issue that's linked to some other issues, like, for instance, the trade competition that China has with the United States. So for now, China's official position on this particular matter is that they are going to abide by the international sanctions regime to put the pressure on North Korea, to bring North Korea to the bargaining table, to get North Korea to denuclearize. From the United States' point of view, if they see any moves in China or in North Korea that suggest an unwillingness to come to the talks or unwillingness to enter into negotiations on denuclearization, they would become, I think President Trump will become highly skeptical about China's role and whether it is, in fact, participating in the pressure campaign that the U.S. is leading. So overall, having these kinds of talks is not a bad thing for President Trump, but in terms of whether or not having these talks leads to actual positive outcome from the United States' point of view in terms of denuclearization, I think that's the key that he's looking at.
Interestingly, at the moment in Beijing as well, U.S. representatives are in Beijing to discuss this trade disputes and negotiations with Beijing as well. So as we mentioned, Trump has accused China of using this trade war to make life more difficult with the North Korea situation. I mean, but as you said, the Pompeo has reassured that China have reassured the U.S. that it's not the case. Are you convinced? I mean, do you think there will be any overlap between the two issues over the next couple of days while these two parties are in Beijing?
Well, you know, the thing that we need to look out for here is willingness on the part of the United States and China to work through this problem on trade. If, as long as the two countries are willing to work through this through diplomatic channels, then I think there's a possibility here that Beijing is not going to link these two issues. But if the possibility for a diplomatic solution to come out of any talks between Beijing and Washington to resolve this issue on a trade war between the United States and China, there's no need to really play along with the United States from Beijing's point of view. So Beijing has less incentive in that case to cooperate with the United States on other matters, including North Korea. So there are other issues like South China Sea, for instance, or Japan. So on many fronts, I think China can make life very difficult for the United States if Beijing does not see a diplomatic solution out of the current crisis that they are in with the United States when it comes to trade.
So we also talked about how North Korea, there are reports that say North Korea is looking to try and get some economic, perhaps assistance out of China during this trip as well, some sort of guarantees. But do you think that's something that has to come later after the U.S. North Korea summit? Or is that something that they're continuing to do? Because North Korea as we know, is still under international sanctions. China can't really do that kind of deal with North Korea yet, can they?
Formally, they can't. But any kind of backdoor deals that could be undermining sanctions in some other ways, it's clearly possible. So from the formal announcements and these talks, we're not going to see anything that suggests a different approach by China. But as these meetings go on for many days, and this one obviously is one of the longer meetings that Kim Jong-un has had with Xi Jinping, I believe the longest, there's a lot to talk about here. And what are they talking about? Are they talking about not only what North Korea will do vis-a-vis the United States in these negotiations, but what China might be able to do, behind closed doors, or even for that matter after the negotiations have been completed and there's some sort of an agreement. What are some things that China might be able to offer on the table formally for North Korea? So there's a whole spectrum of things that the two leaders can talk about. But you're right, for now, in the short term, I don't think China can come out forcefully to say that they're not going to be participating in the sanctions regime.
There's another interesting factor in all this with this trip as well, because North Korean and Chinese media are reporting that he'll be in China till the 10th. Sorry, but interestingly, during this visit, we understand it's going to be his birthday, January 8th, and that's we understand that's today, in fact, January 8th. We're not 100% sure because we don't really know when Kim Jong-un's birthday officially is, but this is the date that has been around for the last few years, especially after the US basketball star Dennis Rodman sang happy birthday to him on this date. So there are people watching and saying that even Xi Jinping might have some sort of birthday celebrations during this time. I mean, what do you make of this timing?
Well, two things. I would focus on the length, as I've said before. This is a very long visit, so the two leaders clearly have a lot to talk about. The second issue is the issue that you raised on timing. Well, and I'm not sure how much weight I would put into the fact that if today is in fact Kim Jong-un's birthday, that he's visiting China on his birthday, because there's no, at least from the reports that we're getting from North Korea, there's no official holiday that's set for Kim Jong-un's birthday. So, and there's no celebration, national celebration around his birthday. There could be many reasons for that, but regardless, it's clearly not an important date for North Korea. So I don't think that's what's critical here. But what's critical is this comes right after the New Year address, and immediately before, if we are going to have a U.S. DPRK summit, immediately before U.S. DPRK summit, a possible visit by Kim Jong-un to South Korea. So from all these, from taking a look at how important this particular juncture is, and he's taking the time at this particular juncture to go to China to discuss these issues with Xi Jinping. So just an appearance of close degree of coordination between Pyongyang and Beijing on a lot of these issues, regardless of whether Beijing is in the room negotiating on these issues in six-party talk or four-party talk context.
So I guess he's signaling that this issue is bigger than his birthday right now. That's all we have time for today, but thank you for coming in and sharing us your insights as always.
Thanks for having me.
That brings us to the end of our show. I'll be back tomorrow with more analysis of the day's top stories. In the meantime, thank you for watching and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.